Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to NBA Group Chat Party of One. I'm going to own this one. I'm going to take this one on the chin. The first pod came out on October 18th. That leaves us with a 2-week gap. At the time of filming this, it is November 2nd. So actually exactly 2 weeks since the last podcast. So I owe all of my millions of loyal listeners quite the apology. I've had a lot going on in my personal life. For those of you that do not know, or if you stumbled across this podcast on Spotify or SoundCloud, I am a teacher, so I teach full-time. I'm going back to school. I'm getting my principal certification. I'd like to embark into the administration side of things at a later point in my career when I'm done with the teaching and being in the classroom and being in the gym. And recently, this is exciting news, and the past week, I also accepted a coaching job. So on top of those two other things, teaching, then going right to do my schoolwork, in between there, I'm going to find some time, and I'm going to be a middle school basketball coach. So that's just some exciting stuff I got going on in my life. It is also the reason, like I said, that we haven't been on here in a while. But I think it's perfect because now I'm going to come on here and my pet peeve as a consumer of sports content is, especially in basketball, being that it's such a long season, is the overreactions to things that are happening after 2 games. And I know I'm not going to be much better on this pod coming on here after 6, 7, 8 games for some teams, but there's nothing worse than going on and seeing that a team goes down 0-2, let's say the Bucks, which didn't happen. I'm looking right at the standings, but I'm just using them as an example considering they won a ring last year. The Bucks come and they start off 0-2, and the world is falling, and ESPN will have you believing that they're one loss away from being out of the playoff hunt. So we're not going to go that far. We're not going to overreact to that extent, but I think it will be fun to take a look at these standings, highlight some key games that we've missed in the past 2 weeks, and kind of give you my live reaction because I've kept up. I've been looking at the standings. I've been watching as many games, consuming as much basketball as I possibly can. But like I said, I've been busy. I haven't seen them all clearly. I've seen most of the local games, so I'll probably spend a little bit more time today on those teams and those big market teams. But without further ado, let's get into it. I will give you my live, unfiltered reaction to the first 2 weeks of the NBA season. Let's start with the Eastern Conference. So we're going to stay in the Eastern Conference, talk about a handful of teams here, what their record's like, how they're looking, talk about some injuries. And it's only right that I start at the top of the Eastern Conference with the Chicago Bulls. Now, anybody who's been friends with me for a little while now knows that I used to be able to say my Chicago Bulls, but that is no longer the case. I am willing, because they look great. If they're willing to take me back as a fan, I'm back on. But I kind of jumped ship for a little bit there. I was a Derrick Rose, Tibbs, Gibson, Noah, Butler, Dang, Kirk Heinrich era Bulls fan. That's actually, to be honest, what really got me into the basketball verse and being so deep into it. But they look great again. They're sitting at the top of the Eastern Conference. And the one game that I will talk about a little bit, I'm not going to get too much into specific games or what happened in those games, but this game is worth mentioning because the only loss they have, the Bulls that is to the New York Knicks, who now has a little bit of that core with Taj Gibson, Tibbs, and D Rose. So as far as the 3 teams at the top of the conference, you got Bulls, Heat, Knicks. Like I said, I got a little off track there. I'm going to start with the Bulls. So the Bulls are 6-1. They look great. They're undefeated on the road, 3-1 at home. After dropping to the Knicks, they've now won 2 straight, which is something I did not see coming considering, although I am on the Knicks bandwagon this year, I am not a fan at the moment of Mitchell Robinson. He picked up a flagrant one. I don't want to say it's a dirty call. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but Pat Williams takes a fall in that Knicks Bulls game and is out for the season. Now, on paper, Pat Williams is not a big name for those that do not follow basketball closely, but he was the 5th starter on this Bulls team. He was a great defender, and they're going to have to go a lot smaller with him out of the lineup. Now, just taking a quick look at the Bulls roster, and this is a season-long thing that you plan, but the best laid plans don't always work out. You plan to have this guy, so all your minutes, all your lineups in the preseason are all planned around having Pat Williams in there. It's going to take more than these 2 games to kind of find the lineup that you want to go with. I personally, let me put my coach's hat on, prep for my season coming up. I personally think Derrick Jones Jr. should be in the lineup. I think he's a veteran presence. He doesn't bring all the same things as Pat Williams, but he brings a lot of the same intangibles. I've also seen that a lot of people are saying that they go back to having DeRozan and go a small lineup and put DeRozan at the 4. I just don't think that's in their best interest, because although it may work on a regular season and throughout the regular season, if you look at the top teams in the East, outside of the Bulls, that is, and I'm not even going to say the standings, because the standings are, of course, all over the place a little bit, but I'm talking teams that really have a chance to go far and contend this year. You can get away with some small ball against the Nets, absolutely. But Philly, with Embiid, I don't think you get away playing that small. Against the Heat, I don't think you can get away with playing small. Against the Knicks, I don't think you get away with playing small. So all these teams that look to be in contention in the Eastern Conference at the end of the season, either very good defensive teams or they have a dominant to very good big man. So I think if you're the Bulls, and some of you, I know, I get it, some of you are probably saying, Tom, what are you talking about? He's not even the center. I think because the Bulls do not have a dominant big man defensively, because don't get me wrong, Vooch is arguably, I'd have to do a list, but he's a top 5 center. I'm willing to say off the top of my head. If you want to sit there and name him, more power to you. But he's got to be a top 5 center league. But defensively, that's not his game. So I think that's why the Pat Williams thing was going to work out so well. He's a defensive-minded 4 to help out and kind of anchor that defense a little bit. Vooch is not a defensive anchor by any means. He's an amazing scorer, amazing rebounder. He'll close out a possession, not a defensive-minded player. So when you go against these big guys, yes, Vooch is going to guard your Embiids. That's going to be the matchup. But what's going to really make a difference is how that guy next to Vooch is playing defensively. Is he helping? Is he a good team defender? All these things that Pat Williams is very good at. Now you're looking to Javonte Green to do. And this is not a slight on Javonte Green. He's smaller. He's not the player that pairs well next to Vooch. He's a journeyman. He's young, but he's a journeyman. Derrick Jones Jr. is playing about 20 minutes a game since the injury. You do have Tony Bradley, who's a true backup big, but he's there to play the minutes that Vooch is on the bench. He's not there to play next to Vooch. So all of a sudden, you go from this team that was on a groove, and right now are still continuing to groove, but you now have a hole in a team that your strength was, especially in the starting lineup, not really having a weak point. I mean, when you throw Zach, Lonzo, DeRozan, Vooch, and Pat Williams out, there's not really a weak point in that team. You have guys that can defend. You have several guys that can get their own bucket. You take him out, you put in Javonte Green, you got someone, if you're a defense, you're like, okay, that's the spot. That's their soft spot. We work from there. That's just coaching 101, basketball 101. So I think closing lineups, it makes it a little easier instead of deciding on who your closing 5 are. By default, it's really just going to be Alex Caruso over Javonte Green, because that's who they've been starting, like I said. In a very unique situation, like if you really need a stop, maybe Vooch comes out, Caruso in, and you keep Javonte in that, or like I said, you bring in a Derrick Jones Jr. or someone like that and kind of go smaller and versatile. But again, I don't think it can be talked about enough. I think that's going to be a huge loss for the Bulls. Going down, you have, right now anyway, in the standings, you then go to the Sixers, who we can spend a whole pod talking about what the deal is with Ben Simmons, how they've looked. Is Embiid going to stay healthy? For the sake of time, I'm going to kind of skim over them as far as the standings go. And I'm going to go to the team that I want to spend a little bit more time on. And that is the Miami Heat, who currently are the 2 seed in the conference. And I love the Heat. Now, anyone who follows me on Twitter, that's TG_NBA, knows that my picks before the year were Bucks over Nets in the Eastern Conference Finals, and I had the Bucks going on to win and repeat as champions. That being said, I would have loved to pick the Heat. I still don't know if that'll be it. I still will stick with my original standings, but man, this Heat team is everything I love as someone who watches the NBA, as someone who loves playing basketball. Like, I wish, like, if I had League Pass, which I know I do have to get on, I do have to buy. Money's a little tight right now. Send me your donations. I would watch every Miami Heat game. Like, they just have guys that defend. They don't have a beat you off the dribble guy. They just play really well. They're just such a good constructed team. They bring it every night. I watched them play the Nets when we had Miami versus Brooklyn. They were out there mugging dudes. Like PJ, Jimmy, Bam. Like, they're not there to take a couple fouls a game and like ticky-tack fouls and one. Like they use it or you lose it. That's how these guys take their fouls. Like, when they foul, they make you feel it. And I think with the way the NBA is this season, and we're going to have a whole separate thing on that once I'm done talking about both conferences, they just fit the mold of where the NBA is at this year, where they're holding the whistle a little bit. You got Jimmy, who's just playing as a top 2 or 3 MVP candidate. You can at me if you don't agree. I'd love to have that conversation. But you have Jimmy playing at that level. You have Bam, who, if it wasn't for the fact that I personally, if I had to do rankings, will never really have 2 guys from the same team, even in my top 10, as far as MVP goes. Like, my MVP pick before the season was Giannis. And I know he has 2 other superstars with him, but I would not have Middleton or Drew, as good as they are, in my top 10 MVP voting. Same thing, the reason why I wouldn't make KD my favorite for MVP before the season is because he has James Harden, another top 5 player in the NBA. Now, Bam is a very good player, and my point is, I got a little sidetracked, that Bam is playing almost at an MVP level. I wouldn't have him in my top 10 because I'm not a fan, like I said, of having 2 guys that are going to finish the season in the top 10. I just don't think it's something that goes along with the trophy, but the whole most valuable player versus best player thing is a thing for another podcast. But Bam, playing at an insanely high level. Kyle Lowry, just doing Kyle Lowry things. He'll score 10 points. I think he scored less than 10 points the other night. I will fact check that as we speak. Yeah, against Charlotte Hornets the other night, won by 15. Kyle Lowry's stat line in 36 minutes. 4 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds. Now, on paper, don't get me wrong, it doesn't look great. I'm not going to lie to you and say I watched the game. But he was in there for 36 minutes. I guarantee his handprint on that game was worth more than that stat line. That's just who Kyle Lowry is. And then guess what? He'll have those games where he goes and gets you 20 and 8. So you have him in there. PJ, since I have it up, let me tell you PJ Tucker's stat line from that same Miami Heat Hornets game where, again, the Heat won by 15. PJ Tucker played 23 minutes. 2 points, no assist, 5 rebounds. And again, I guarantee you had a huge impact on that game. And that is why I love the Heat. They are just, the box score, there's the gif of Jimmy Butler tossing the box score, tossing the paper behind his back. That's truly what I believe every single player on the Heat in their core believe. They don't care about you can keep your box score. We're 4-1. That's who the Heat are, and I think that's going to get them very far. I think it's a reason they got so far in the bubble. Last year, I do think they need to reload. I think Lowry and Tucker was absolutely necessary to them taking another step and getting back in contention, but I do think they'll be there at the end of the season. Tyler Hero, oh my goodness, I missed that one for Sixth Man of the Year. He's looking like he's going to easily be top 3 in that award. I was talking to my 2 friends, shout out Kevin Riley and Joe Ritchie. We usually kind of have a chat where we talk about our preseason awards, talk about some bets. We all forgot Tyler Hero. We just all kind of assumed that he would be in the starting lineup. I don't know how I missed that one in the preseason. I'm sure it was out there. I just skimmed over it. But yeah, Tyler Hero is a shoo-in if he keeps playing like this for Sixth Man of the Year. Duncan Robinson, best shooter in the NBA, percentage-wise last year. He's right there again. And that's your 6. That's your 6 right there. And then you bring in guys like Marquise Morris and Max Struss, I think. I don't have the roster in front of me. I think he's been getting some burn. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody. But guys like that, that's just a good basketball team. And they sit at 4-1 in second place right now. The next team I want to talk about is the one that, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably most excited me to get to. And that is the New York Knicks. And right before I go into this Knicks talk, because I'm sure this is going to take a little while, I'm looking at the rest of things. I'm just going to give you a live reaction here. So the Knicks are in third at 5-2. So you got the Bulls at 6-1, Heat at 5-1, Knicks at 5-2, tied with the Sixers and the Wizards. Then you got the Raptors, Hornets, Nets. That's your 8 right now, your top 8. So let me just give you a live reaction and just briefly talk about these teams, and then I'm going to finish the Eastern Conference with the home team, New York Knicks. So as I look at this, again, I'm not going to do the whole ESPN overreact to 6 or 7 games into the season, especially with a short off season and teams probably just starting to gel together. But immediate reaction, the Cavs at 10 at 4-4. Boy, are they exciting. I must say, I've seen about 1 million highlights of Cavs games. I'm seeing what they're doing with their starting lineup. I am one of the biggest Colin Sexton fans in the world. I thought the lineup they were throwing out was absolutely preposterous, but Evan Mobley is so damn good that it works. That's it. That's all I'll say about the Cavs. I love Colin Sexton, and Mobley is absolutely insane and turning around that franchise. There, I said it. I know I said I wasn't overreacting 8 games in. Evan Mobley is saving the Cavaliers franchise. Anyway, the Nets at 4-3. Some people may be shocked by that. They've rattled off 2 straight wins. KD looks good. Got ejected the other night. I love that fire. Although it wasn't anything too crazy. Harden starting to play a little bit better. I guess the surprise teams up here is with no Ben Simmons. Embiid seemingly going to locker room every game. 5-2. Can't complain. They rattled off 3 straight, holding the 4 spot. Wizards, I said, if anyone listened to the first podcast, or actually I don't even think it was the first podcast, I think it was my YouTube video where I ranked the Eastern Conference teams. If you want to go look that up, and you can kind of start cold taking me if you want. I said, you know what, the Wizards were by far the hardest team to rank. No one had any idea. You were lying, or you were a Wizards fan if you said they were going to be a top 4 or 5 seed. And again, it's early in the season, but I straight up said I can't rank them. I don't know. I think they could be anywhere from a playoff lock, Bradley Beal, and a bunch of good players that don't necessarily are a perfect fit, but they can all ball. Or I said it could go terribly, and they could it could be an awful fit. They're never going to figure it out. But at the very least, they're playing good basketball. They seem exciting to watch. I haven't seen a game, but They're sitting at 5-2. And then there's the Raptors. That's the last one I'll talk about. There's a bunch of ones I could get into this. Bucks are 3-4, but I'm not going to get into that because they haven't had Middleton or Drew. They're just surviving until those guys get back. They're going to go through probably, even when they do get back, that whole, all right, we proved ourselves. We're here for the postseason now. We're going to make the playoffs. We'd like a high seed. If we don't get it, it's more important to be healthy. But like I said, last one. Let me talk about the Raptors real quick before we get back to the Knicks. The Raptors are an amazing defensive team. And defense, my friends, is back in the NBA. Let me just say that. But I watched the Raptors-Knicks game the other day. Knicks have their own troubles, which we'll get to in a second, with blowing leads, or even if they hold on to the win, just making it too close. That's just the Knicks. I think that's just a New York sports team thing in general nowadays. But I digress. The Raptors, again, they're playing great defense, but it's defense that they might not have gotten away with a year ago. They're out there like some of those guys in the Heat game that I referenced, just mugging people, just playing like in people's face, and I fucking love it. Like, they're a good defensive team. Scotty Barnes looks good. They just have a bunch of guys, and I know it's a super overused terms, but I was listening to, I think it was Bill Simmons. And just, this is my last rant, I promise. I'm feeling ranty today. That's why I wanted to get on and film today. I'm feeling talkative. I was listening to Bill Simmons. He said, he's like, don't you just feel like you go up and down every team in the NBA? And whereas a year ago you would say there's a good chunk of teams that just don't have guys, that just have guys that aren't exciting. And then you look at this year, and like almost every team has at least two guys, like a bunch of guys. You're like, wow, I'd tune into that game. Like, yeah, you know what? I'll watch the Pacers play the Cavs. That's fun. You got a bunch of good players. We don't know if those teams are going to make the playoffs, but that's a fun game. And I'm using my own examples, but this is kind of the gist of what he was saying. And looking up and down the standings, which I did right before the pod, just to kind of give it a quick glance before I got on here, I think he's right. I mean, there's so many teams that just have either a good makeup or just exciting guys, which I think is awesome for the NBA. So let's get back to the Knicks, because we still have the whole Western Conference to get to. It might even have to become a part 2 pod, but we'll see. So the Knicks are sitting at 5-2. They are playing great basketball. They are the third team, along with the Raptors, in the Eastern Conference, that is, along with the Raptors and the Heat, that I think are just like really thriving in this new, I say this loosely, but this new defensive era of the NBA that seems to be coming. They're playing great defense. Mitchell Robinson is a huge anchor down there for them. They have depth. They have a guard that can come in at any time and give you good minutes. Between Rose, Kemba, Quickly, even Alec Burks comes in and gives good minutes. The Knicks they have RJ Barrett. I'm excited. I'm excited to sit here and talk about them, because RJ Barrett looks like he's really taking that next step, which is what this team needs. They needed a big step from RJ or Julius to take that next step in the playoffs. And Julius Randle had less room. Like, his step didn't need to be as big. For them to really get better, I think most Knicks fans would agree with me, you needed a huge step out of RJ. Because Julius, I'm not going to say he is what he is. He's getting better. His defense has improved. But, like, RJ was the one with more room for improvement, for obvious reasons. And he seems like he's up for the task. He's playing phenomenal basketball. Had a huge 30-point game. I think it was 30. Please, someone can fact check. Feel free to call me out, Knicks fans. Shout out my boy TK. I don't think he's missed a minute yet. Feel free to call me out on that one. I could definitely be wrong. I'm doing this mostly off the top of the dome. But I think he had 30 points the other night. I saw the highlights. He was absolutely going insane, hitting a big shot down the stretch. So you got Fournier, who's kind of living up to the hype. They're just a good team. I mean, the Knicks-Bulls game was one of the more exciting games I've seen so far, and one of the few games, although there's a lot of games I've watched most of, one of the few games I watched from starting tip to the end. And it was just like a complete performance. Like, Kemba's looking good. He's just got to stay healthy. You're going to get 15 to 20 minutes of just Taj Gibson doing nothing, but it meaning so much. and I know that sounds funny, but there's just guys like that in the NBA. Like, PJ is the same way, PJ Tucker, going back to the Heat, but he makes it known. Let's be real. He makes it known because he's talking. Taj Gibson does the same things that PJ does, meaning he's just there going to work. Like, here's my lunchbox. Like, go in, get it done. But Taj isn't going to be screaming and yelling. So he's not appreciated sometimes by the normal NBA fan as much as a guy like Taj Gibson. And he's the perfect fit for this team because although you don't have, and I'll have my Knicks friends talking to me about this, with Julius Randle, superstar, star, whatever you want to call him, they have a lot of mouths to feed because they don't really, like, you don't have a LeBron, you don't have a KD. So having a guy like Gibson soak up so many minutes as kind of the fifth man on the court, just going to work, head down, let's get it done, is super important. Because you got Julius Randle, you got Barrett. You just have all these guys that can score the ball, can create for others. I could have a whole podcast on Tom Thibodeau and Derrick Rose. Like, just talk about their story arcs, their arcs in the NBA. But I am, because I didn't enough when I talked in the preview about the Knicks. I didn't talk enough about my man Derrick Rose. So Derrick Rose is my favorite player in the NBA. If you did not know that, you clearly don't know me at all. So I appreciate you for listening to this, first of all. But I think he is still an incredible basketball player. Like, I really think he is, like, his transformation from just, I'm quicker and more athletic than you, to, I may not be those things, but I'm almost always going to make the right basketball play, is something that most guys in the NBA probably can't do. And yes, there are guys, I say most, there are guys that I'm sure that people will name or tell me, but, like, it's truly incredible. This is a guy that was averaging 25, league's youngest MVP. And he has not said a peep about, I need to be the starter on Team A or Team B. I need to do this. You need to have this type of team around me. He comes in, as long as he's playing for his boy Tibbs, he's going to come in, make the right basketball player, and he's gonna mold to your team. In the playoffs last year, we saw him kind of, I don't even like using the word vintage because I think he has a more mature game, but we saw a vintage Rose, a guy that was coming in and being your leading scorer when Randle was struggling. And then just like that, no pride, no nothing like that, just comes in, new team, new season. All right, I'm coming off the bench. Back up Kemba, who's coming in. Another New York guy coming in. He's the point guard now. I'm going to back him up. I'm going to back up Fournier. I'm going to come in. You need me to distribute, I'll distribute. You need me to try and get 20, I'll try and get 20. Man, this can become a Derrick Rose podcast real quick. But I digress. So, that being said, I really do. I love the Knicks, man. The top three in the Eastern Conference right now is just my dream. As an NBA fan, seeing Bulls, Heat, Knicks at the top, I think it's good for the league. I think the fact that all three of those teams are playing great defense, the Heat and the Knicks in the top five in a lot of defensive categories. Bulls, I don't, grade-wise, they're not top five in anything. I did pull up the stats, but they have, like, Caruso and Lonzo as a defensive backcourt is incredible. Like, they have guys that are going to defend. So just to see those three teams play a real balanced offensive, defensive game without a top five player in the league on either of those teams is just really awesome to see. Like, I love that. And because of that, and because I'm just on a defensive rant here, I'm going to hold off on the Western Conference review, or the Western Conference 2 weeks in. The one thing I will say is, no coincidence, Jazz at the top. And now I can say my Utah Jazz, because I've pledged my allegiance to them for a couple seasons now. Utah Jazz at the top 5 defense. Coincidence? I think not. So I think the only way to finish a pod like this is I'm on the defense thing, which some of you will laugh at because I think I'm the only person that just absolutely loves defense. Like, I rather watch a defensive basketball game than 2 players go off, but that's just me. I know I'm probably in the unpopular side of that. But I want to finish talking about how I keep mentioning how important and how good these defenses have been and how it's leaving them at the top of the standings. And I just want to talk about NBA scoring is down this season. And I think it's better for the consumer, for the basketball consumer. I know Draymond came out, it was about a week ago now, and said last couple of years he hasn't even been interested in watching basketball, watching NBA basketball, which is crazy to have one of your spokesperson, I'm not going to say like a top player in the league, but certainly a common name in the league coming out and saying, I wasn't watching basketball, and that he's essentially back and he's watching games again. That's awesome for the league. And it's not just to the eye test. Like, this isn't me just coming and saying, oh, they're not calling those 3-point shooting fouls. The season must be down. Like, it's truly in the numbers. Just for reference here, I have basketball reference, which for anyone who watches basketball or is into stats, they're a very reliable website. It's kind of up to date, like day by day on the stats. This is as of today. This season, the average offensive rating up till this point in the NBA is 106.2. So that's not points per game, just period. That's points scored per 100 possessions. So they come up 100 times on offense. How many points are you getting out of it? So 106. Last season was 112.3. And in the bubble season, it was 110. So the season before that, 111. So it's always in that 110, 112 range in most of the last 10 seasons or so. And then before that, in a different era, it was lower. But it's down to 106.2. That's a full 6 points. Now, you might not think on the ceiling of things, not the ceiling, sorry, like on the outside looking in, that doesn't look like much of a difference, but that's a lot. And some of it has to do with the new calls, which, I mean, tell me if you agree. I love these. I absolutely think it's one of the best things I have in the game. These non-basketball moves, not getting the whistle, we're just getting out of hand. Like your James Harden, your Trae Youngs, just flailing. Not just flailing their feet out. Steph Curry's guilty of it. And you know what? I'm going to backtrack. I don't even like using the word guilty because anything you could do to get an advantage in a game has to be done. So I don't blame those guys. I don't want to say they were guilty of it. So it wasn't the best choice of words. They were doing what was right for their team. But it's just great that they're not getting these anymore. Steph Curry, actually, speaking of him, came out and said that it's going to take, there was a sideline report in between one of the Warriors games. And the sideline reporter, I don't know the name, was coming out. And the report was basically saying that she talked to Steph before the game and was asking him about these foul calls. And he said that he has to literally untrain his body in real motion, in real time, to not kick out and try and get that call. Which gives me two initial thoughts. One, that is awesome that he is consciously working on it. He's not complaining. It's a real change. He has to change with it. But two, give him a lot of credit. The fact that this became a muscle memory thing for him over the past couple of years is just a credit to how good Steph Curry and these guys are at scoring and finding ways to score and getting additional points and helping their team win. But as far as a consumer, it's great. There's 3.6 less free throw attempts this season. There's 3.6 fewer free throw attempts per game this season. So that's just something that I personally like to see. No one wants to see a free throw contest. But it was really just taking away from the art of the game. And I'm so glad to see it's down. And then the other thing that you can credit it to, which we've seen a lot of players come out and say, is that maybe these seasons, these quick seasons, these short off seasons, maybe they're catching up to guys. I'm not a professional athlete. I am in nowhere as good shape as these athletes. And I play basketball once a week, and my body's shot. It's just me getting old. These guys are older, obviously different animals. Don't even know how we're from the same species. But they're saying their bodies haven't been through this. And you got your LeBrons and these guys who can all afford these things, don't get me wrong, but these guys are around the clock, people working on them with their diet, taking care of their bodies. But some of these guys don't have that to that level. They have their team guys, but they don't have their personal guys. So I think that has a lot to do with points per game being down. And then just to see like this league, man, like the NBA. The third thing that I'll say could be lowering the scores of these games, and this is just straight comedy. Like this is why we love the NBA. This is why we're watching. It's just full of drama. CJ McCollum came out yesterday, and he answered a tweet, I believe it was, or a reporter, but it ended up, of course, like anything else, on hashtag NBA Twitter. He said that a reason scoring could be down, the reason why players on his team could be struggling, is because they switched the ball. And that is how I want to end this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. That is just anyone who plays basketball, like pick-up basketball, like you can play with a ball that is ripped apart. Like you can play with a ball that is wet from going in a puddle. And does it affect your game? Yes. But you're just happy to be out playing basketball. These guys in the NBA, it's just an incredible league. It makes you laugh, but it's the reason why we all love it. There's so many personalities. The NBA does a great job marketing these personalities and just going with it, man. So there you have it. The NBA scoring is down. If you ask CJ McCollum, president of the Players Association, it's because they switched the ball. It's like the kid that goes to the gym and says, "Why are you not using my ball? It's not blowing up enough. That's why I'm not winning," at your local YMCA. That is what the NBA has come to. All right, ladies and gents. Well, if you stuck around this long, I appreciate you. Appreciate each other. Have an amazing night. I hope to be back on. I really do. I know if you missed it, if you kind of fast forward to try and get to what I was saying about your team or whatever it may be, go listen to the beginning of the podcast. I gave everyone an update. I explained my absence. I gave some life updates that kept me from being on here these past 2 weeks. I'm going to try and stick it to one a week. There you have it. I've been kind of in chat saying I want to produce one today. I want to do one tomorrow. We're not going to start too ambitious. We're just going to slowly take off here. So I'm trying to produce and get one pod out a week. We had about 65 listens. So whether you turn it on, share with a friend, anything like that is, again, super appreciated. I'm not doing this for the likes or for the listens, but it is nice to see that what I'm putting out there is being listened to, because what I hope this does is, again, I'm not trying to make money out of it. I just want to start a conversation. Like, that's what my NBA Twitter is for. Like, I just love talking hoops. I'm going to be coaching hoops. Just reach out and just talk hoops with me, man. That's what this is. Remember, NBA group chat, party of one. Somebody make it a party too. Hit me up. Let's talk. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll catch you here next time.